I'm going to give you some more history. I did that video in 1913, Jekyll Island. I told you that you should read the book Creatures of Jekyll Island. Here, Creatures of Jekyll Island, by Edward Griffin. A second look at the Federal Reserve. This is the 5th edition. Very, very informative book. Very, very good book. And I'm going to read something to you. I wrote down from my research. So, U.S. 1787 Treaty of Paris. Red numbers in the corner of your certificate, your birth certificate. Check those numbers and you'll see what your stock is worth. Exchange number on World Stock Exchange, the international bank that bought you in 1930. 2 Thessalonians 2:1 through 14, verse 13. Romans 8:16 bears witness. John 6:63, Spirit quickens, Spirit in life. You need to get wise, people. So, Registry, Bank of Canada, Minister of Finance, Deputy, Bond Tracking Number, Financial Instrument worth $1.2 million. Some people even more. Treasury goes up when registered $400,000 a year. The Fed transfer payments, but under contract law, we were never offered full disclosure. Therefore, there's no contract, which means money belongs to the people. Denial of consent to be governed, intellectual property, my trade name, and it's copyrighted, it's mine. Safer, you're not a corporation. So sovereign, you're a sovereign entity. So the Supreme Court has ruled monetize birth certificate, 4 pillars: bond, economy, land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, knowledge, village. Through 1835, Native American Justice Center, Treaty of Camp Holmes, codified 4 statutes at large, 474. Federal recognition is irrelevant and immaterial if you have a treaty. U.S. government, that's all. That's required to be an idea. Acknowledge, validated. Treaty regarding Native American tribes. Article 6, Section 2. Federal Constitution, U.S. Constituted. Treaty, supreme law of land. Sovereigns. Tribal numbers, laws, jurisdiction, debt instrument, private placement program, knowledge, village, international bill of exchange. So go to monetizecoal.com. Bilingual means uniform commercial code is one of a number of uniform acts that have been promulgated in conjunction with efforts to harmonize the law of sales and other commercial transactions in all 50 states within USA. UCC looked up as Bible in World of Business under Caesar of Rome. It was established that all nations under the empire that do any form of business should all play on a level field, but what's not told is that the UCC is based directly on Vatican canon law of the Roman canon law, which means its regulations are under the Roman Catholic Church. Origin of birth certificate. What is a birth? Come into our dock at a wharf, such as when a ship comes into a dock, it arrives. So consequently, when a ship pulls into a port, it pulls in and stops. That is called its birth, because the ship has now arrived. So birth certificates, it's on the laws of the high seas. It's governed by the UCC common law. So when the ship pulls into its berth, the first captain must do is present a certificate of manifest to port authorities. What is a certificate of manifest? It is a document listing a ship's contents, cargo, crew, and passengers. So whatever the ship brings in at berth, the captain has to present as a certificate of manifest, showing the identity and value of the items on the ship. Now, consequently, when people are born, they come out of their mother's water. Therefore, they must have a birth certificate, which is a certificate of manifest, because the people are considered a corporation-owned item. They are a human resource. This goes back to the German Nazi concept that every human coming out of their mom's water must be birthed, and therefore the people have to have a certificate of manifest to see who this individual is and how much they are going to make for the government in the New World Order. So since the U.S. went bankrupt in 1933, all new money has to be borrowed into existence. All states started issuing serial number certificated warehouse receipts for births and marriages in order to pledge the people as collateral against those loans and municipal bonds taken out with the Federal Reserve banks. The full faith and credit of the American people is said to be that which back the nation's debts. That simply means the American people's ability to labor and pay back that debt. In order to catalog its laborers, the government needed an efficient, methodical system of tracking its property to that end. Humans today are looked upon merely as resources, human resources, that is. Why do you think when you call to see if a company is hiring you, you have to go through a division known as human resource? The people are resources to the government. They're because are a security on the New York Stock Exchange, which is why if you look at all birth certificates in America, it will say at the bottom, this is prioritized on security paper. Don't accept if not on full color security paper. At bottom, a series of numbers. Red numbers are Security Stock Exchange on World Stock Exchange, in which American people are worth money to the International Bank that bought the government in 1930s. Governmental assignment of a dollar value to the heads of citizens in America began on 7/14/1862 when President Lincoln offered 6% interest-bearing bonds to states who freed their slaves on a per-head basis. See, the government knows that they can only extract so much money out of the economy, so their idea is to bankrupt private owners so that the banks who are behind this syndicate become the owners of all assets in this country. That's the real scheme. The real motive by encouraging Congress to spend money it doesn't have Congress has to turn around to lien on American labor and American private property, to lien for collateral. See, they do that by fraudulent conversion of birth certificates for ex-doctors who are franchises of the state are obliged to sign birth certificates and forward them on to Secretary of State in Sacramento. They make certificate copies and forward those birth certificates to the Department of Commerce in Washington, D.C. The Department of Commerce does the same thing. They make certificate copies and forward them on the International Monetary Fund in Brussels, Belgium. Now, this is the center of the hub of the banking syndicate, and they are, of course, loaning these huge sums to various governments around the world in corporations. Congress of U.S. The Congress needs something for collateral, and what they use are our birth certificates. They get treated as certificates in equity, which may mature on 18th birthday of the person whose name appears on the birth certificate. The bank then keeps track of these and uses the number that any particular nation has available as a collateral on the international debt as performance units on the international debt. These certificates in equity end up being regarded as performance units on the international debt. The more of those you have, the more money you can borrow it's like this: the more collateral I have, the more money I can borrow from banks and the more I can secure. Securing international debt by leaning on the persons and property of their citizens, doing this on massive scales, it's technically a fraudulent conversion of the birth certificate, because if they did that with your birth certificate and never told you they were putting a lien on your person and starting a third-party debt that you're responsible for. You had no meaningful choice in the matter, which makes it an unconscionable contract by definition. Think of it as walking into a department store and saying to the salesman, "I really like that refrigerator, ship it to my home tomorrow and send the bill to Willie Brown." Well, Brown opens his mail and says, "Sears, $800. What's this? I didn't buy this. I'm not a party to this transaction. I didn't even know about it. Why are they billing me?" Well, this is what's happening with Federal Reserves. They're supplying Federal Reserve notes, right? Well, Brown is the American people, and I, the one who went in there and bought the fridge, the federal government is the one who goes and buys the fridge, representing the Congress, and saying that send the bill to this American people. And you can lien on their property, by the way, use our police to enforce it for you. We'll exterminate them, and extract money. So that's the fraud the government and Obama is hoping, what they're doing to the American people. And it's fraud against the American people, and they use the police to back them up should anyone try to fight against this, and that's why they want to take everyone's guns. The fraud is that Congress bankrupted the U.S. Treasury and turned all their gold over to the Federal Reserve banks, which aren't federal government agencies. Federal Reserve is a municipal corporation created by an act of Congress, but it's still a corporation. And all that gold is now in their hands, but there wasn't enough to discharge the debt that had accumulated up to 1933. The country is broke. Bankruptcy to discharge restitution of debt. Using state-federal bankruptcy rules for this, but the creditors, of course, are in charge, and they're telling Congress, go ahead, continue, spend money, more money. You don't have because we have the birth certificates. We'll take it out on the land and labor of the American people. They're our collateral, our chattel, our cattle. Stimulus checks, but they don't tell you this will devalue the dollar bill, and the banks will close up, because how can they spend more in a recession to boost the economy? Therefore, by banks closing up, it will force Americans into one-way electronic spend systems that will be mentioned and administered by government-forced people to comply with New World Order. In 1921, the Federal Shepard-Towner Maternity Act created the Birth Registration Maternity Act. It was sold to American people as a law that would reduce maternal and infant mortality, protect health in moms and infants, and for other purposes. Provided establishment of a Fed Bureau designed to cooperate with state agencies in the overseeing of its operations and expenditures. Federal Birth Registry, which exists today, creating federal children. This government, under doctrine of parents patrium, now legislator for American children, as if they are owned by federal government through public schools enrollment process and contract license, represent adults in doctrine process for permission from government, imposing as God to do all things necessary to carry out daily act that exists in what is called a free country. Before 1921, the records of births and names of children were entered into family Bibles, as were the record of marriages and deaths. These records were readily acceptable by both family and law as official records. Since 1921, people have been registering their children, even though there's no federal law requiring it, serves as proof that he/she is born U.S., thereby making a U.S. citizen. Past several years, a Social Security number has been mandated by federal government to be issued at birth. 1933, bankruptcy was declared by President Roosevelt. Governors of 48 states pledged full faith and credit of their states, including citizens, as collateral for a loan of credit from federal reserves. To wit, full faith and credit clause of Constitution, U.S. Article 4, Section 1, requires that foreign judgment be given such faith and credit as it had by law or usage of state of its ongoer, that foreign statutes and to have force and effect to which they are entitled in home state, and that a judgment or record shall have faith credit, conclusive effect, and obligatory force in other states, as it has by law in state whence taken assets as children as assets, the state can claim and nullify your parental rights. The child itself, when born, is the asset of the trust established by the birth certificate, and the Social Security number is the numbering or registration of the trust, allowing for assets of trust to be tracked, this making whomever gets a birth certificate owned by state. Government mandated or legislated national ID is unconstitutional in any way. Federal jurisdiction to legislate doesn't exist. They have no legislation for ordering you to have an ID card, health card, and so forth. But they know the people are ignorant to the law, so therefore by ignorance they keep coming up with all these forms of taxation against American people. Birth certificates prove that you are national property of international banks. The birth certificate form of theft of true ID as a free child to a servant of state. By affixing a national seal of approval to a child, the state denies freedom, rights, dignity that was ordained in scriptures. You don't need proof you were born. Your breathing is proof enough for these hypocrites. By requiring a license, the state is claiming control and ownership over your liberty and property. The highest of the high assembly doesn't exist on paper, but in the hearts of men, and is expressed in their outward acts, because there is no breath of life from the birth certificates. They're trying to use you as collateral. He gives us the breath of life, the highest of the high, and we exist beyond these pieces of paper, and he is our authority. And you are created by the highest of the high, not man, by your name being in upper and lower case letters. These corporations, all caps letters, for purpose of profit. It means the entity is a servant of Caesar when their name is in all caps letters. Creature of government. So, we all have been ignorant to the truth that we were bought with a price, and that when the Heavenly Father and Savior said that in the scriptures, it is literal. And we have bank accounts that he bought us with, that the government has been robbing us and using us as collateral to steal what is ours. So, I hope it's a little bit jumbled, my writing, and it was hard for me to even read my own writing because I wrote this information so quickly. But there's a lot of YouTube videos out there this day and time talking about the history of the Federal Reserves and the lies and the fraud in the government that we've been under. And again, like I said, this book, if you read this, The Creatures of Jekyll Island, this is tells about the fraudulent Federal Reserve System. It's a very, very good book. A very good author, Edward Griffin. Very good book, very knowledgeable, very thorough, and hopefully this information that I have shared will help set the captives free. Thank you for listening. Have a great birth, a true birth in your true birth ship. Okay? Get out of this Federal Reserve System, which I believe is part of the mark of the beast. Thank you, and have a good walk with the highest of the high. And I hope you'll watch my videos on my book, Namesake Confession, and that you'll seek the true name of the highest of the high, because all the ones in the scriptures, from what I found, are names that the enemy has put in there. Thanks for listening. Bye.